The fluorescent lights above me blur into halos as they wheel me into the operating room. Everything feels surreal, like I'm watching someone else's life through frosted glass. The antiseptic smell burns my nostrils, but it's nothing compared to the burning in my chest, not from the impending surgery, but from the words still echoing in my mind. Finally, you're useful for something. Victoria had said it so casually, examining her freshly manicured nails, as if my life-saving organ donation was nothing more than an inconvenient nail appointment. She stood there in her designer hospital gown. Yes, she'd actually brought a designer gown for her pre-op photos, while I shivered in the standard issue paper that barely covered my back. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Martinez, squeezes my shoulder gently. She's the only one who's looked me in the eye today. "How are you feeling, Emma?" Before I can answer, my mother's voice cuts through. "She's fine. She's always been the healthy one." She doesn't look at me when she says it. She's too busy adjusting Victoria's hair, making sure every strand is Instagram perfect for the brave warrior princess photos they'll post later. "Mom," I whisper, my throat already dry from the pre-op fasting. "I'm scared." She finally looks at me, and for a moment, just a fleeting second, I think I see something maternal flicker in her eyes. Then it's gone. "Don't be dramatic, Emma. Your sister needs this." "Your sister? Not our daughter needs this. Your sister." As if Victoria and I exist in completely different family hierarchies, and I'm just the help. Dr. Martinez begins preparing the anesthesia mask, and my father chooses this moment to pull the lead surgeon aside. He doesn't even try to lower his voice. Why would he? I'm already being erased. "Dr. Reynolds, I want to be absolutely clear. Victoria's recovery is the priority here. We need the best portion of the liver, the healthiest section. Emma's young, she'll bounce back from whatever complications might arise." Complications. He says it like he's discussing a delayed flight, not potentially life-threatening post-surgical issues for his daughter, his other daughter, the disposable one. The mask hovers above my face now, and Victoria leans over me. Her perfectly contoured face fills my vision, and she smiles. That cruel, perfect smile that's fooled everyone but me for 23 years. "You know Em," she says, using the nickname she only deploys when she wants to hurt me. "Maybe after this, we can stop pretending you're part of this family. It's exhausting for everyone, especially Mom and Dad." The words hit me like physical blows, each one precisely aimed. But it's my mother's response that truly breaks me. She doesn't defend me. She doesn't scold Victoria. Instead, she strokes my sister's arm and whispers, "Don't stress yourself, darling. We'll make sure the surgeon takes the best part of her liver for you. You deserve only the best." I want to scream. I want to rip off the monitors and run. But I'm already strapped down, already fading as Dr. Martinez places the mask over my face. The silicone seal feels like it's suffocating me even before the gas starts flowing. "Count backward from 10, Dr. Martinez says gently. She's trying to be kind, but she doesn't know she's asking me to count down to my own erasure. 10, I manage. My father is still talking to Dr. Reynolds. "Just make sure Victoria gets what she needs. We don't care about complications on the donor's side." 9, my mother is showing Victoria something on her phone. "Look, darling, I've already written your recovery post. Blessed to have a donor who finally gave something meaningful to our family." 8. The room starts to fade at the edges, darkness creeping in, like water filling a sinking ship. but through the growing haze, I hear Dr. Reynolds respond to my father, his voice clinical and detached. "Mr. Harrison, I understand your concerns, but I must remind you that both patients are equally important in this procedure." My father's laugh is sharp, dismissive. "Doctor, we're paying for this surgery. We decide what's important." 7. The numbers are getting harder to form. My tongue feels thick, useless. But my mind is still cruelly clear, still processing every word, storing every betrayal. Victoria's face appears above me one last time, blurry now through the medication and my tears. "Sweet dreams, Em. Try not to die, okay? It would really ruin my survivor story." 6. As the darkness claims me, one thought burns through the sedatives, through the pain, through 23 years of being unseen and unloved. It's not a prayer or a plea, it's a promise. They're not even pretending to love me anymore. 5. The mask seals completely over my face, and I stop fighting the inevitable. As consciousness slips away, I wonder if I'll wake up at all, or if that's what they're hoping won't happen. The last thing I hear is my mother's voice, distant now, like it's coming from another world. "Make sure the photographer gets here before she wakes up. Victoria needs to have her first moment with her saved sister documented. It'll go viral." The darkness takes me then, complete and absolute. And in that darkness, something inside me, something I didn't even know existed, begins to crystallize. It's not anger, it's not even hurt anymore. It's something colder, clearer, more powerful. It's the beginning of becoming someone they never thought I could be. Love is supposed to protect you, not harvest your organs for spare parts. I wasn't born invisible. I've seen the photos, the few that survived the great family album purge of 2015. There I am, a chubby-cheeked toddler with wild curls and my father's eyes. Or at least the eyes I thought were like his. In those early pictures, I'm held, I'm smiled at, I'm centered in the frame. The last photo of me being treated like a daughter was taken on my 2nd birthday. I'm cake-covered and laughing, my mother's arms wrapped around me. She's looking at me like I'm her whole world. 6 months later, Victoria was born. And that woman in the photo might as well have died with my sister's first breath. I used to think it was normal, the way love in our house seemed to be a finite resource, and Victoria simply needed all of it. When you're 3, 4, 5 years old, you don't question why mommy stops reading you bedtime stories or why daddy doesn't toss you in the air anymore. You just accept that your little sister is special and you're not. By the time I was 7, I'd learned the rules of my existence. Victoria's piano recital meant I walked home from school. Victoria's stomachache meant my appendicitis went unnoticed until I collapsed in gym class. Victoria's desire for my bedroom meant I moved to the converted attic without complaint. "She's just more delicate than you," my mother would say, not even looking up from whatever Victoria needed. "You're the strong one, Emma. You understand." I was 8 when I won my first science fair. I'd spent weeks on my project about how plants grow toward light, nurturing seedlings in different conditions, documenting everything meticulously. My teacher, Mrs. Chen, said it was exceptional work for a 3rd grader. She even called my parents to tell them. They forgot to come. Victoria had a play date that day, couldn't possibly be rescheduled. I stood in the gymnasium holding my blue ribbon, watching other kids get hugged and photographed by their parents. Mrs. Chen took a picture of me with her phone. She printed it out the next day and gave it to me quietly, with sad eyes that said she understood More than any adult should have to. I still have that photo. It's hidden in a lockbox with all the other evidence of the person I used to be. The real awakening came when I was 15. It was December, and Mom was addressing Christmas cards at her pristine desk, the one I wasn't allowed to touch. Victoria was perched beside her, suggesting which photo to use. Because, of course, our Christmas cards always featured a professional photo shoot. "This one's perfect," Victoria said, pointing to a family portrait we'd taken at the country club. "Everyone looks so good." My mother frowned, tilting her head. "Something's off about the composition." That's when Victoria laughed, that tinkling, cruel laugh I'd grown to recognize as a warning. "It's Emma. She doesn't match the aesthetic. Look, she's practically fading into the background anyway, like a ghost." I waited for my mother to defend me, to say something, anything. Instead, she picked up her phone and called her assistant. "Jennifer, I need you to contact that photo editor again. Yes, the same one as last year. We need someone removed from the Christmas card photos." I stood frozen in the doorway, my after-school snack turning to ash in my mouth. They didn't even know I was there. Or maybe they did, and that made it worse. "Make sure he does a better job than last time," Mom continued. I could still see her shadow in the background. It looked messy. Last time. This wasn't the first time I'd been erased from our family's public face. I walked to my room, the attic room, and pulled out last year's cards from my desk drawer. I studied them with new eyes, and there it was. A subtle inconsistency in the lighting where I should have been standing. That night, I started my first journal. Not a diary full of teenage angst, but a documentation project. Times, dates, direct quotes, evidence. The disparities were laughable when I laid them out on paper. Victoria's 16th birthday, a surprise party with 200 guests, a BMW wrapped in a giant bow, a weekend trip to Paris. My 16th birthday, a card slipped under my door with a $20 bill inside. "Buy yourself something nice," it said in my father's rushed handwriting. When I got a full scholarship to medical school, one of only 10 awarded nationwide, my parents' response was to plan a gap year celebration for Victoria, who had decided she needed to find herself instead of attending any of the safety schools that had accepted her out of pity for our father's donations. "Medical school will always be there," my mother said when I told them about the scholarship. "But Victoria's youth won't last forever. We need to support her journey." My volunteer work at the Children's Hospital, where I spent every weekend for 3 years, went unmentioned at family gatherings. But Victoria's single afternoon at a charity photo shoot made her a philanthropist in my mother's eyes. The extended family noticed, even if they never said anything directly. At reunions, aunts and uncles would stare at me with confusion, like they were trying to place me. Cousins whispered behind their hands. My grandmother, before dementia stole her clarity, once pulled me aside and said, "You have your mother's eyes, dear." When I told her I had my father's eyes, she'd looked confused and muttered, No, that's not right at all." I documented that too. There were other things, small things that seemed like nothing individually, but painted a picture when assembled. My different blood type on my medical bracelet, type O negative, the universal donor, while my parents and Victoria were all type AB. "Must be a mistake," the school nurse had said, but mistakes don't repeat on every medical form for 20 years. The way family photos stopped abruptly after my 2nd birthday replaced by carefully curated shots where I was always slightly out of focus or positioned behind someone else. The way my parents could never quite remember the details of my birth, the hospital, the time, even the season, seemed to shift depending on who was asking. I became a ghost in my own home, but ghosts see everything. They hear conversations not meant for them. They notice documents left carelessly on desks. They understand patterns that others assume are invisible. When I turned 18, I asked to see my birth certificate for college applications. My mother had fumbled with the safe, produced a document that looked newer than Victoria's, despite being supposedly 4 years older. "We had to get a replacement," she'd said quickly. "The original was damaged in a flood." We lived in Arizona. What flood? But I didn't ask. I'd learned by then that questions were dangerous. Questions made them notice me, and being noticed in the Harrison household when you weren't Victoria was never a good thing. So I stayed quiet. I documented, I waited, I planned. Every cruel word, every deliberate erasure, every moment of being unseen. I wrote it all down. Not in anger, but with the clinical detachment I'd learned in my pre-med classes. I was building a case study, though I didn't yet know what I would do with it. The morning of the liver donation surgery, I'd added one final entry to my documentation. They're not even pretending anymore. 23 years of being invisible had taught me something valuable. When no one sees you, you can see everything. And I'd seen enough to know that the truth about my place in this family was darker than even I had imagined. I learned to be silent, not because I was weak, but because I was documenting. The third day post-surgery, I couldn't breathe without feeling like someone was driving stakes through my abdomen. The doctors said this was normal. Some discomfort is expected, they assured me with clinical smiles. But their eyes told a different story when they checked my charts, and hushed conversations followed them out of my room like shadows. Victoria, 1 floor up in the VIP wing, was already hosting visitors. I could hear the laughter drifting down through the vents, champagne toasts to her bravery, her strength, her survival. The hospital had actually allowed champagne. Money, I'd learned, could bend any rule, including medical protocols. I'd dragged myself out of bed that morning, determined to walk the halls like they'd instructed. Movement promotes healing, they said. What they didn't say was that every step felt like my remaining liver was trying to escape through my surgical incision. The nurses were all busy with Victoria's steady stream of guests, so I shuffled alone, one hand on my IV pole, the other pressed against my screaming abdomen. That's how I found myself outside my father's temporary office, a private room the hospital had provided for him to work during Victoria's recovery. He wasn't there. He was upstairs, playing the devoted father for the society photographers. My mother had somehow convinced the hospital to allow inside. The door was slightly ajar. A manila folder lay open on his desk, papers spilling out like secrets begging to be discovered. I should have walked away, the old Emma would have. But the old Emma had been carved out of me 3 days ago, along with 60% of her liver. I slipped inside. The papers were insurance documents, dense with medical terminology and legal jargon. My eyes caught on a figure, $500,000. The recipient insurance payout for a successful living donor liver transplant. Below it, another line, donor compensation, $0. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. There were medical evaluations, risk assessments, genetic compatibility reports. Victoria's name appeared over and over, each mention accompanied by astronomical figures. Specialized postoperative care, $50,000. Private recovery suite, $10,000 per day. Experimental anti-rejection medications, $75,000. And then, stuck between 2 pages like an afterthought, a yellow sticky note in my mother's precise handwriting. Tell her the follow-up surgery is just routine. Don't mention the complications. The room tilted. I gripped the desk, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. Follow-up surgery? Complications? I found the page she'd marked. It was a risk assessment specifically for me, hidden beneath all of Victoria's documentation. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I forced myself to read every damning line. Donor presents with previously undiagnosed genetic markers, indicating increased susceptibility to hepatic failure post-donation, risk of liver regeneration failure, 47%. Recommended course, decline donor candidacy or prepare for possible emergency intervention, including potential retransplantation, 47%. I had a coin flip's chance of my liver failing to regenerate properly. They knew. They'd known before they wheeled me into surgery, before they let me sign the consent forms, before they watched me count backward from 10. But wait, genetic markers? I flipped back through the pages, searching. There it was, buried in the technical data. Genetic anomaly noted. Donor's markers inconsistent with familial pattern. Recommend further testing. A recommendation dated 3 weeks before my surgery. A recommendation that was clearly never followed. Another document caught my eye. A letter from a genetic specialist to my father. Mr. Harrison, as discussed in our phone consultation, the genetic incompatibilities between Emma and your family medical history are significant. While she remains a viable donor for Victoria, due to her O-negative blood type and remarkable organ compatibility, I must stress that her unique genetic profile puts her at substantial risk. I strongly advise full disclosure to the patient before proceeding. Full disclosure. I almost laughed, but I was afraid it would tear my stitches. At the bottom of the pile, I found the worst of it. Email printouts between my parents and their lawyer. My mother's words glowed on the page like poison. If something happens to Emma during recovery, would it affect Victoria's insurance payout? We need to ensure Victoria's future is secure regardless of outcomes. Outcomes, I was an outcome. The lawyer's response was equally cold. The recipient's insurance is independent of donor welfare. However, I recommend having Emma sign additional waivers. Attached are documents absolving the family of any responsibility for post-surgical complications. Have her sign them while she's still under post-operative medication. She'll be more compliant. More compliant. They wanted me drugged and obedient while I signed my life away. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly photographed everything with my phone. My hands shaking so badly, it took 3 tries to get clear images. I just slipped back into the hallway when my father rounded the corner. "Emma, what are you doing here? You should be resting." His concern was performative, hollow as a chocolate Easter bunny. "Just walking," I managed. The nurses said, Yes, well, don't overdo it. Victoria's been asking about you." No, she hadn't. Victoria had probably forgotten I existed the moment they wheeled her to her luxury suite. But I nodded, played the grateful sister one more time. That night, as I lay in my standard issue hospital bed, listening to my own labored breathing, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't waste another moment of my life begging for scraps of love from people who saw me as spare parts. People who would let me die as long as the insurance check cleared. I needed answers, real answers, about the genetic anomalies, about my unique profile, about why nothing about me matched the family I'd grown up in. And I'd find them myself, because clearly the only person who cared about my survival was me. The next morning, when the routine follow-up surgery, consent forms arrived, just as my mother's note had promised. I smiled at the nurse and asked for a pen, but I didn't sign them. Instead, I wrote 7 words that would begin my journey back from invisibility. I want a second opinion and a lawyer. The nurse's eyes widened. She looked up at me, really seeing me for perhaps the first time since I'd been admitted. "Of course," she said softly. "That's your right." My right, I'd forgotten I had those. As she left with the unsigned forms, I touched the scar where they'd taken more than just my liver. They'd taken my last illusion that somewhere deep down, my family loved me. But in its place, something else was growing. Not anger. Anger was too hot, too quick to burn out. This was colder, more patient. It was determination. I pulled out my phone and began researching. Genetic testing companies, medical advocacy lawyers, patient rights organizations. Each search led to another, a breadcrumb trail of possibilities I'd never known existed. My parents had made one crucial mistake in their calculation. They'd assumed I'd always be the compliant daughter, the silent ghost who accepted whatever crumbs they threw. They'd forgotten that the same girl who documented 23 years of neglect, in secret, was more than capable of documenting her own resurrection. As the pain medication wore off and brutal clarity took its place, I made myself a promise. I would find out the truth about who I really was. I would recover, not just from the surgery, but from decades of being erased. And when I did, when I finally had all the answers they'd hidden from me, I wouldn't waste my energy on revenge. I'd do something far more devastating. I'd succeed without them. I didn't need their apologies anymore. I needed the truth, and I would dig it up myself. The blog started as a whisper in the dark at 3 a.m., when the pain meds wore off and the hospital halls echoed with distant sorrows. My fingers trembled over my laptop keyboard as I typed. They took 60% of my liver and 100% of my illusions. This is what really happens when family treats you like spare parts. I published it anonymously under the handle Invisible Donor. I expected nothing, maybe a few views from other insomniacs, maybe a comment or two from people who understood pain. What I got was an avalanche. By morning, my inbox was flooded. Messages from other donors who'd been coerced, manipulated, guilted into giving pieces of themselves, literally, to family members who saw them as nothing more than organ banks. Stories that mirrored mine in heartbreaking ways. Young women whose families had treated them like medical insurance policies. Men who'd been emotionally blackmailed into donations that nearly killed them. Within a week, Invisible Donor had 10,000 subscribers. Within a month, 100,000. Medical professionals reached out, offering to write guest posts about the ethical violations they'd witnessed. Lawyers specializing in medical advocacy wanted to contribute pro bono advice columns. Psychologists offered insights on family trauma and medical coercion. But here's where the story takes a turn that even I didn't see coming. Victoria, still high on her survivor story and the attention it brought, decided she wanted to become an advocate for organ donation. My parents seeing dollar signs in the form of sponsorship deals and speaking engagements, hired a team to build her brand. The problem? Victoria had never written anything more complex than a sorority rush caption. Her team was desperate for content that sounded authentic, medical, and emotionally resonant. That's when Melinda Chen, my secret business partner, and the only person who knew my identity as invisible donor, suggested something deliciously ironic. She was a marketing genius I'd connected with through the blog, and she had contacts everywhere, including in my sister's newly hired PR firm. What if, Melinda said, during one of our encrypted video calls, Invisible Donors Organization started offering pro bono content to organ donation advocates, speeches, social media posts, educational materials, all through anonymous submissions, of course. I saw what she was suggesting immediately. You want me to write for Victoria? Think about it. She becomes the face of organ donation advocacy using your words, your research, your pain, transformed into her platform. The payments from her speaking engagements. They'll insist on paying the content creator. That money funds your legal education, your advocacy work, your search for the truth. It was brilliant. It was twisted. It was perfect. So I became my sister's ghostwriter in the most literal sense. Every tearful speech she gave about the beautiful gift of life, I wrote it from my hospital bed, IVs still in my arm. Every viral Instagram post about gratitude for second chances, crafted by me between blood draws and liver function tests. The medical accuracy that impressed doctors at conferences, that was me, studying between pain medication doses, turning my suffering into education. Victoria never questioned where the content came from. Her team told her they had the best medical writers in the industry, and she believed it because she'd always believed she deserved the best. The payments went to a shell company I'd set up, which funded my online law degree and the expansion of my advocacy network. While Victoria posed for magazine covers in designer gowns, talking about her journey, I was building an empire. The Invisible Donor Foundation became a force in medical advocacy. We funded legal support for coerced donors. We lobbied for stricter ethical guidelines in family-directed donations. We created a database of genetic testing resources for people who suspected, like I did, that their medical histories didn't match their families. The beautiful irony? Some of our biggest donations came from people moved by Victoria's speeches. My words in her mouth, inspiring others to support the very organization, working to prevent what had happened to me. I graduated from law school on a Tuesday afternoon, cum laude, specializing in medical ethics and donor rights. The ceremony was virtual, which suited me fine. I watched from my apartment. I'd finally moved out of my parents' house during recovery, claiming I needed to be closer to my doctors. They hadn't protested. One less shadow cluttering their perfect home. My parents never noticed. They were too busy managing Victoria's ascending star. She'd become a regular on morning shows, a keynote speaker at medical conferences, the face of 3 major organ donation campaigns. Her Instagram followers numbered in the millions. The book deal, ghostwritten by me, of course, hit the New York Times bestseller list. Your sister is changing the world, my mother gushed during one of our rare phone calls. She's so articulate about the medical aspects. It's surprising, really, considering she never showed interest in science. I made appropriate noises of agreement while reviewing the latest financial reports from the foundation. We'd just passed $5 million in donations, Our legal team had successfully challenged 17 cases of coerced donation. Our genetic database had connected 43 people with their biological families, people who, like me, had discovered they weren't who they'd been told they were. Because that was the other part of my silent rise. The genetic testing I'd ordered for myself had revealed the truth I'd suspected in that hospital room. I wasn't a Harrison, not biologically. The markers that put me at risk for liver failure? They came from a completely different genetic line, one that led me down a rabbit hole of sealed adoption records and falsified documents. But I didn't confront my parents, not yet. Instead, I used my law degree and my network to dig deeper, to build an airtight case. Every document I uncovered, every connection I made, every piece of evidence I assembled, it all happened while they thought I was withering away, in my apartment, recovering from my routine follow-up procedures. The pinnacle of absurdity came when Victoria was nominated for a humanitarian award. The nomination specifically cited her groundbreaking work in donor advocacy and her eloquent, medically accurate presentations that have educated millions. She called me, breathless with excitement. It was the first time she'd called me since the surgery. "Emma, did you hear? The National Medical Ethics Foundation wants to give me their humanitarian award. Can you believe it? Me, who almost failed high school biology." Yes, the same high school biology I'd tutored her through, doing her homework while she went to parties. "That's wonderful, Victoria," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "You must be so proud." "I am. Oh, and Emma, the foundation wants to make a special presentation at the gala, something about innovative donor advocacy programs. You should come. I mean, if you're feeling up to it. You know, since you were a donor and all." Since I was a donor and all. As if it were a footnote in her story, not the reason she was alive. "I'll think about it," I said. "Great. Oh, and Emma, you look at medical stuff sometimes, right? Could you help me understand some of these terms in my acceptance speech? My writers used all these big words, and I want to make sure I pronounce them correctly." Her writers, me. She was asking me to help her pronounce words I'd written, concepts I'd researched while my liver struggled to regenerate. "Send them over," I said. "I'll make you an audio file." That night, I sat in my apartment, not the cramped studio my parents assumed I lived in, but the penthouse I'd purchased with the earnings from my consulting work, and looked at the empire I'd built from a hospital bed. Bank statements showing millions in foundation assets, legal documents for the 37 cases we were pursuing, medical journals featuring articles I'd written under pseudonyms, a law degree with my name on it, my real name, the one I'd discovered through genetic testing, not the one I'd been given by people who'd bought me like merchandise. Tomorrow, Victoria would stand on a stage and accept an award for work she couldn't even understand, while our parents beamed with pride. She'd wear a designer gown that cost more than most people's cars and deliver a speech about sacrifice and gratitude and the gift of life. And I'd be there, not as the forgotten sister relegated to the back row, but as someone they'd never see coming, the keynote speaker for the foundation segment, the anonymous donor who'd built the very programs they were celebrating. They just didn't know it yet. I didn't need to beat my chest. Success speaks its own language, and I'd become fluent in silence. The Fairmont Hotel ballroom glittered like a jewelry box, all crystal chandeliers and golden ambiance. 800 of the medical community's most prestigious names filled the space, their tuxedos and gowns creating a sea of elegant black, punctuated by jewel-toned splashes. I stood in the wings, watching my family's table through a gap in the curtains. Victoria sat at the center, radiant in a $30,000 Valentino gown that probably cost more than most liver transplants. Our parents flanked her like bookends. My mother in vintage Chanel, my father in a tux that screamed old money. They were holding court, my mother's laugh tinkling across the space, as she no doubt told another fabricated story about Victoria's journey. 5 minutes, Dr. Harrison, the stage manager whispered. Dr. Harrison, not Emma Harrison, the discarded daughter. Dr. Sarah Harrison, my real name, the one I'd legally reclaimed 6 months ago, after the DNA test confirmed what I'd suspected all along. The stage manager didn't know I was the same Emma from Victoria's story. No one did, except for Dr. Marcus Chen, who was about to help me deliver the most elegant revelation of my life. I smoothed my simple black sheath dress, nothing designer, just beautifully cut, and checked my presentation one final time. Months of preparation had led to this moment. Every slide was perfect, every fact triple-checked, every revelation timed for maximum impact, without a single trace of malice, because that was the key to refined revenge, letting the truth do the damage while keeping your hands pristine. And now, the MC announced, before we present our humanitarian award, the Invisible Donor Foundation would like to share a groundbreaking announcement about their new genetic screening program. Please welcome Dr. Marcus Chen, our lead researcher, and Dr. Sarah Harrison, our chief legal advocate. I walked onto the stage, my heels clicking against the polished floor. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother stiffen. She recognized something, the walk, perhaps, or the way I held my shoulders. But her mind couldn't quite make the connection. After all, Emma was supposed to be convalescing somewhere, weak and irrelevant. Dr. Chen began the presentation, his voice carrying the authority of decades in genetic research. Ladies and gentlemen, the Invisible Donor Foundation has identified a critical gap in organ donation protocols. Too often, genetic relationships are assumed rather than verified, leading to increased risks for donors. The first slide appeared, anonymized data showing the correlation between genetic incompatibility and post-donation complications. The audience leaned forward, interested, but not yet aware they were about to witness a public unraveling. Our genetic screening program has already helped identify 47 cases of non-biological family donations, Dr. Chen continued. These donors were at significantly higher risk due to genetic factors that standard compatibility tests don't reveal. I stepped forward for my part. The legal implications are staggering. Donors who aren't genetically related to recipients often lack the same legal protections. They're more vulnerable to coercion, less likely to receive proper follow-up care, and statistically more likely to experience severe complications. My voice was steady, professional. I didn't look at my family's table, but I could feel their growing recognition, like electricity in the air. To illustrate the importance of this program, Dr. Chen said, we'd like to present a case study. With the full consent of all parties involved. That was a lie, but they'd signed broad releases for Victoria's publicity campaign. We've analyzed a high-profile donation case that perfectly demonstrates why genetic verification is crucial. The screen changed. Victoria's smiling face appeared next to mine. Not a recent photo, but one from the hospital, taken just before the surgery. The room stirred with recognition. This was their humanitarian award winner's story. The recipient, a well-known advocate, received a liver donation from someone presented as her biological sister, Dr. Chen explained clinically. Standard blood type matching showed compatibility. The donation proceeded successfully. Relief flickered across Victoria's face. This was just her story being used as a positive example. She started to smile, already preparing her humble expression for when they'd undoubtedly ask her to say a few words. However, Dr. Chen continued, and that single word dropped like a stone into still water. When we performed comprehensive genetic analysis as part of our study, we discovered something remarkable. The next slide appeared, 2 DNA profiles side by side, with a compatibility percentage at the bottom, 0%. The donor and recipient share no genetic markers. They are not biological sisters. In fact, they're not related at all. The ballroom erupted, not in chaos, this was too refined a crowd for that, but in a wave of hushed exclamations and turning heads. All eyes swiveled to Victoria's table, where my family sat frozen like a tableau of shock. This case is particularly significant, I said, stepping forward again, my voice cutting through the murmur. Because the donor experienced severe complications that could have been predicted with proper genetic screening. A 47% chance of liver failure that was hidden from her, a risk that exists precisely because of genetic factors unrelated to the recipient's family line. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. Dr. Chen clicked to the next slide. It showed redacted medical documents, but anyone who looked closely could see the damning phrases, genetic anomaly noted. Recommend further testing. Donor's markers inconsistent with familial pattern. The ethical violations in this case are extensive, I continued, my tone remaining academic, detached. The donor was not informed of her increased risks. Documentation suggests the recipient's family was aware of the genetic incompatibility but proceeded anyway. Insurance payouts of over $500,000 were processed while the donor received no compensation and inadequate post-operative care. Victoria's face had gone from confused to ashen. She was starting to piece it together, the anonymous content provider, the medical knowledge in her speeches, the familiar voice now speaking from the stage. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. Most troubling, Dr. Chen added, our investigation revealed that this wasn't a case of adoption or family blending. The donor's genetic profile suggests a completely different origin, one that raises serious questions about how she came to be in this family at all. I finally looked directly at my parents. My father had half risen from his chair, his face purple with rage or shock. My mother sat perfectly still, her social mask cracking like fine porcelain under pressure. The Invisible Donor Foundation, I said, letting my voice carry to every corner of the room, has used this case to develop comprehensive protocols protecting vulnerable donors from exploitation. We've also established a fund specifically for donors who discover post-procedure that they were misled about their genetic relationships and risks. The final slide appeared. It was simple, elegant. Every donor deserves truth. Every person deserves to know who they really are. We thank the recipient in this case, Dr. Chen concluded with surgical precision, for allowing us to use her story. Her advocacy work, built on the pain and sacrifice of a donor who nearly died has indeed changed lives, just not in the way anyone expected. The lights came up for the transition to the award ceremony. The MC, clearly flustered, tried to restore order. Well, that was illuminating, and now for our humanitarian award. But Victoria wasn't moving toward the stage. She sat frozen, the beautiful speech I'd written for her crumpled in her shaking hands. The cameras that had been positioned to capture her triumphant moment were instead recording her complete unraveling. I walked off the stage, passing their table on my way to the exit. For a moment I paused, not to gloat, that would be beneath the moment. I simply stood there, letting them see me clearly for the first time in 23 years. "Emma?" my mother whispered, her voice broken. "No," I said quietly. "Emma was the girl you bought and broke. I'm Dr. Sarah Harrison, and I believe you have some questions to answer to the media, to the medical board, and most likely to the police." Security was already moving toward their table. The foundation had shared our findings with the appropriate authorities that morning. Fraud, human trafficking, medical coercion. The charges would be extensive. As I walked away, I heard Victoria's voice, high and panicked. "I didn't know, I swear I didn't know she wasn't really my sister." Perhaps that was true. Victoria had always been incurious about anything that didn't directly benefit her. But ignorance built on cruelty was still cruelty. The last thing I heard before the ballroom doors closed behind me was the MC awkwardly announcing the humanitarian awards ceremony will resume after a brief intermission. The truth doesn't need violence. It cuts deeper than any blade ever could. The valet brought my car around, not the beaten Honda my parents thought I still drove, but a sleek Tesla that purred with quiet elegance. As I waited, I could hear the chaos spilling from the ballroom. Not screaming or shouting, this crowd was too refined for that, but the unmistakable sound of a social earthquake, urgent whispers, the scrape of chairs, the click of phones, capturing what would become tomorrow's headlines. "Sarah?" I turned to find Melinda Chen holding my coat, a small smile playing at her lips. Behind her, other members of the foundation board emerged from the gala, each giving me a subtle nod of acknowledgement. We'd all known this moment would come, had planned for it meticulously. But knowing and experiencing are different things. "The authorities are handling everything," Melinda said quietly. "Financial Crimes Division, medical board investigators, even someone from the FBI's Human Trafficking Unit. Your documentation was thorough. 23 years of evidence, compiled with the patience of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to uncover." "Thank you," I said, accepting my coat, "for everything." "We should be thanking you. The foundation's donation page has crashed from traffic. Apparently people find your story inspiring." Inspiring, I'd never thought of it that way. To me, it was just survival, evolving into justice. As my car arrived, I reached into my purse and pulled out a simple envelope. Cream-colored, expensive paper, the kind my mother had taught me to appreciate during one of her rare moments of attention. On the front, in my careful handwriting, "For the Harrisons." "Could you make sure they get this?" I asked Melinda after I leave. She took the envelope with the solemnity of someone handling a live grenade. "Of course." I slipped into my car, and as I pulled away from the hotel, I saw them in my rearview mirror. My parents, the people who'd raised me, if you could call it that, being escorted out by security. My mother's perfect posture had crumbled. My father's commanding presence had shrunk. Victoria stumbled between them, her designer gown catching on her heels, her face a mask of shock and betrayal. They looked broken, and for a moment, just a fleeting second, as I almost felt sorry for them. The letter I'd left would reach them tomorrow, after the lawyers, after the freezing of assets, after the first news stories broke. I'd written and rewritten it a dozen times before settling on the simple truth. To the people who called themselves my parents, by now you know what I've known for months. I am not your daughter. I never was. My name is Sarah Catherine Harrison. I was born on March 15, 2001, at 3:47 a.m. at Mercy General Hospital in Phoenix. My parents were Michael and Jennifer Harrison, professors who loved me, wanted me, and spent 21 years searching for me after I was taken from the hospital nursery when I was 2 days old. You knew. Maybe not at first, but certainly by the time I was old enough to bleed for Victoria. The blood type discrepancies, the genetic markers, the way I looked nothing like any of you. You knew and you kept me anyway. Not out of love, but as insurance, a universal donor for your real daughter. I've spent months trying to understand how you could do it, how you could raise a stolen child, watch her grow, and feel nothing but calculation. The investigators will have their theories. The prosecutors will assign motives. But I think the truth is simpler and worse. You never saw me as human. I was a resource, like a savings bond you could cash in when needed. The saddest part, I loved you. Despite everything, I loved you with the desperate faith of a child who had nowhere else to turn. Every cruel word, every dismissal, every time you erased me, I absorbed it all and still came back, hoping this time would be different. It never was. I want you to know that I don't forgive you. Forgiveness would require me to absolve you of choices you made freely, repeatedly, for 2 decades. But I also don't hate you. Hate would mean you still have power over me, and you don't. Not anymore. My biological family, my real family, is waiting for me. A mother who never stopped hoping. A father who kept my nursery intact for 20 years. A sister who grew up knowing she had a missing piece. Yes, a sister. Her name is Amy. She's nothing like Victoria. When she found out about the liver donation, she cried for hours. Not because she was moved by the beautiful sacrifice, but because she was horrified that I'd been forced to give so much to people who gave me nothing in return. She offered to be tested, to see if she could donate to me if my liver fails. That's what real sisters do. The investigators will ask you questions you won't want to answer. The media will paint you as monsters. Your friends will disappear like smoke. Victoria will lose her platform, her sponsors, her carefully crafted image. Everything you built on the foundation of my suffering will crumble. But I won't be there to see it. I've already moved on. My only regret is the 23 years I spent believing I was unlovable. You taught me that lie so well, I almost died believing it. But here's the thing about lies. They only have power in darkness. And I've finally found the light. Don't look for me. Don't try to contact me. Your part in my story is over. The girl you called Emma is gone. She died on that operating table, along with 60% of her liver and the last of her illusions. Dr. Sarah Harrison, however, is very much alive, and she has a real family to get home to. The letter would wound them, I knew. Not because it was cruel. I'd been careful to keep my tone clinical, factual, but because it was true. Every word was a small revolution, a quiet uprising against 23 years of erasure. My phone buzzed. A text from Amy, my biological sister. "We're at the restaurant. No rush. Mom made them keep the kitchen open. She says you're probably hungry. Real food," she says, "not hospital cafeteria garbage." Dad's trying not to cry. I told him he's allowed to cry. We all are. See you soon? I smiled, feeling something I hadn't experienced in so long I'd forgotten its name: belonging. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a small Italian restaurant. Nothing fancy, just a family place, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic bread wafting through the air. Through the window, I could see them, my parents, gray-haired now but with faces that looked like home. Amy bouncing slightly in her seat with nervous energy. They'd waited 21 years for this dinner. As I walked toward the door, my phone lit up with notifications. The story was already breaking. Humanitarian Award winner exposed as victim of illegal adoption. Liver donor reveals shocking truth at medical gala. The ghostwriter who brought down a dynasty. I silenced my phone and pushed open the restaurant door. A bell chimed and 3 faces turned toward me. My mother, my real mother, stood up, tears already streaming down her face. "Sarah," she whispered. And for the first time in my life, I heard my name spoken like it was precious. Behind me, in a hotel across the city, the Harrisons were learning what it meant to lose everything. But ahead of me, in a small restaurant that smelled like home, my real family was waiting. I walked forward into their arms, leaving the ghosts behind. I didn't need them to know I'd won, just that they'd never steal another day of my life. 6 months later, I stand in my biological grandmother's kitchen, learning to make pierogi from scratch. Her hands, weathered by 80 years of living, guide mine as we fold the dough. She doesn't speak much English, and my Polish is terrible, but love needs no translation. She touches my face sometimes, still marveling that I'm real, that I'm here. "She never believed you were gone," my mother translates, watching from the doorway. Even when the police gave up, even when everyone said we needed to move on. She lit a candle for you every Sunday for 21 years. 21 years of candles. 21 years of faith. While I was being erased from Christmas cards, she was keeping me alive in flames and prayers. The news cycle has moved on as news cycles do. The Harrison story was sensation for a week. Wealthy family exposed for purchasing kidnapped baby, forcing her to donate organs to their biological daughter. Then came the think pieces, the documentaries, the true crime podcasts. Everyone wanted to understand how it happened, why it happened, what kind of people could do such a thing. I declined every interview. My story wasn't entertainment, it was evidence, and I'd already presented it where it mattered. In courtrooms, in medical ethics boards, in the policies that now protect vulnerable donors. Victoria lost everything. Her platform crumbled when people realized every word she'd spoken was written by the sister she'd tortured. The sponsorships vanished. The book was pulled from shelves. Last I heard, she was living in a small apartment in Tucson, working at a department store. Part of me wonders if she's learned anything from the fall. A larger part realizes it doesn't matter. Her education is no longer my concern. My parents, I still catch myself calling them that sometimes, habit dying hard, are awaiting trial. The charges are extensive: kidnapping, fraud, medical coercion, falsification of documents spanning 2 decades. Their assets were frozen. their reputation destroyed. The country club revoked their membership. The society pages that once featured them now document their disgrace. But I don't follow their downfall. I'm too busy building. The Invisible Donor Foundation has expanded internationally. We've helped reunite 17 families separated by illegal adoptions. We've prevented over 100 coerced donations. We've changed laws in 6 states. My liver, the 40% that remains, has healed beyond doctors' expectations. Remarkable regeneration, they call it. I call it poetic justice. Amy visits every weekend. We're making up for lost time, she says, though time isn't something you can really make up. You can only make the most of what you have left. She's teaching me to be a sister, a real sister. We fight sometimes about stupid things like what movie to watch or whose turn it is to buy coffee. It's wonderful. It's normal. It's what I never had with Victoria. My father, my real father, built me a desk. He's a carpenter, works with his hands creating beautiful things from raw wood. I started it when you were born, he told me, running his fingers over the smooth surface. Added to it every year on your birthday. Figured you'd need something solid to come home to. 21 years of work, waiting for me. The desk sits in my home office now, where I write legal briefs and foundation proposals, where I ghostwrite articles for medical journals about ethical organ donation, where I sometimes just sit and marvel at having a place that's truly mine. But the biggest change isn't in what I've gained, it's in what I've lost. The weight of trying to earn love that was never available, the exhaustion of being unseen, the constant ache of not being enough. That weight is gone, and in its place is something I'm still learning to recognize. Peace. Last week, I received a letter forwarded through my lawyer. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My mother's, the woman who raised me. I held it for a long time, unopened. Then I fed it into the shredder, unread. Some echoes aren't worth hearing, because here's what 23 years of being a ghost taught me. Family isn't about blood. The people who raised me shared my blood. We'd proven that definitively when I bled for Victoria, but they were never my family. Family is about choice. It's about showing up. It's about seeing someone for who they are, not what they can give you. My biological family shares my DNA, yes, but more importantly, they share my joy. They celebrate my victories, small ones like making pierogies without burning them, and big ones like the landmark legal case we just won. They hold me when the nightmares come, when I wake up feeling like I'm back. On that operating table, being carved up for parts. You're safe, Amy whispers on those nights, crawling into bed with me like the sister I never had. You're here, you're whole, you're ours. Whole. Even with 40% less liver, I'm more whole than I've ever been. The foundation is hosting another gala next month. This time, I won't be lurking in the shadows or revealing terrible truths. I'll be at the head table, surrounded by people who see me, value me, love me without condition or calculation. My grandmother will be there, proudly telling everyone in broken English that I'm her granddaughter, the one who came home. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if the Harrisons had loved me. If they'd raised me as their own, truly and completely. Would I have ever thought to take that DNA test? Would I have found my way home? Or would I have lived my whole life as Emma Harrison, grateful for scraps of affection, never knowing that somewhere in Phoenix, 3 people were lighting candles and refusing to give up hope? I'll never know. And that's okay, because the path that led me here, through pain, through betrayal, through literal organ harvesting, also led me home. Every scar tells a story. Mine tells the story of a girl who was stolen, sold, used, and discarded. But it also tells the story of a woman who refused to stay, disappeared, who built an empire from a hospital bed, who transformed her pain into purpose and her silence into power. The Harrisons thought they were taking everything from me, my childhood, my identity, my liver, my life. What they actually did was show me exactly who I wasn't, which freed me to discover who I was. Their daughter Emma died on that operating table, but Sarah Harrison loved, wanted, searched for, celebrated. She was reborn. And that's the most elegant revenge of all. Not destroying those who hurt you, but building something so beautiful from your pain that their cruelty becomes the footnote to your triumph. My grandmother calls from the kitchen. The pierogies are ready. My mother is setting the table. My father is opening wine. Amy is telling a terrible joke that makes everyone groan. I walk toward them, toward the sound of my real life, and I don't look back. The ghosts have no power here. Dignity isn't what they couldn't take from you. It's what you choose to build from what remains. If this story resonated with you, remember that the most powerful revenge isn't in the destruction of those who wronged us. It's in the elegant transformation of our pain into purpose. Here at Refined Revenge, we believe every betrayal can become a bridge to something better. Every scar can become a story of strength. Was there a moment in this story that hit close to home? A twist that made you rethink your own situation? Share your thoughts below, but remember, your story of rising above is still being written. Subscribe to Refined Revenge for more stories of elegant justice, where dignity wins over destruction, and the best revenge is a life beautifully lived. Because sometimes the most devastating response to those who tried to break you is simply becoming unbreakable. What's your refined revenge story? We all have one. The question is, are you still writing it, or are you ready to live it?